In recent months, I've been subjected to severe and unacceptable pressure, including threats to disseminate false allegations of domestic abuse unless financial demands were met.
This entire UFC title picture is about to explode. One belt will be questioned, one legacy will shake, and by the end of this story, nothing looks the same. But the reason why is darker than anyone expected. Two massive UFC storylines just slammed into each other at full speed. Alex Pereira just iced the so-called White House fight dream, and at the exact same time, Ilia Topuria's own words are lighting his future on fire. And trust me, one sentence he said is about to change how the UFC treats this division moving forward.
You can understand even more so why he would want to step away and not focus on fighting or defending his title, because obviously there's a lot going on. It's extremely sad. It's I feel for everyone involved. I feel for his family. I feel for his kids. It's an awful situation. And so let's see what happens.
Ariel Helwani didn't sugarcoat it at all. He flat out said it would be understandable if Ilia walks away right now. And when a journalist that plugged in says that, you know, the storm behind the scenes is way worse than fans realize. And wait until you hear what this delay could force the UFC to do next year.
Finally, Ilia, because what the public wants to know, you announced not the first quarter, that you'll fight in January. When would you like to fight? When you feel it's time to return? Well, Ilia says, as I've communicated, I'm going through some personal problems. I do not have an exact date when everything will be fixed. I hope that as soon as possible, as soon as it is solved, I will be ready to go back.
Ilia himself admitted he's dealing with personal issues, with no timeline, no return date, no clear answer, and that alone sent shockwaves through the title picture, because when a champion says, I don't know when, the clock starts ticking louder than a final round horn.
Ilia says, as I've communicated, I'm going through some personal problems. I do not have an exact date when everything will be fixed. I hope that as soon as possible, as soon as it is solved, I will be ready to go back. In the Octagon, I prioritize at this time the welfare of my family, of my children, my own. So as soon as everything is solved, I will be back to the Octagon to give it the show that everyone deserves.
He made it clear this isn't fear, this isn't motivation slipping, this is responsibility, family first, life first, fighting later. And that sounds noble until you remember how ruthless the UFC machine is when belts stop moving, and that's where this gets dangerous. Because Helwani quietly dropped the real bomb, if this drags on too long, the UFC may have no choice but to upgrade that interim belt to the undisputed title. And suddenly one delay becomes a career-altering disaster, especially with contenders watching closely.
Can suddenly change who's next in line.
You do wonder, at some point, will they decide to make that interim belt the actual belt if he's not going to come back anytime soon? I think I don't think that they're going to be forced to do that for the January event. We'll see what kind of timeline he's on, how long this is going to play out. But if it's by next summer, perhaps they make that call. And perhaps that's why a guy like Armin doesn't seem too bothered by what's going on. These things can play out in many different ways, and you're on the outside and then you're on the inside, and everything changes in an instant.
Armin isn't panicking at all, and that tells you everything, because he knows one injury, one delay, one summer announcement, and boom, the entire division reshuffles overnight, and someone who was outside yesterday is headlining tomorrow. Then Chael Sonnen stepped in and said everyone needs to slow down, because the headlines lied, flat out lied. There was never any indication that Ilia surrendered the belt, vacated it, or handed the crown away, and yet the internet ran wild like it already had.
Ilia Topuria made headlines. My belief through the headlines is that Ilia was walking away from the UFC championship belt, thus elevating Justin Gaethje and Paddy Pimblett to undisputed title. Now, once I dug into this, I can't quite recall why I thought it in the first place. I mean, once I dug into it, there was nothing in the article that said that Paddy and Justin was going to be undisputed, or that the UFC was accepting, or that Ilia was surrendering a belt back.
Chael admitted he even bought into it at first, until he actually read the articles and realized nothing connected Ilia stepping away to Gaethje or Paddy becoming undisputed champs. It was speculation sprinting way ahead of reality.
The story is that this made headlines for something that we were already told a couple of weeks ago, and there is no escalation from that, meaning Ilia Topuria is not vanquishing or having stripped from him the title. It's actually all of these articles going around, all of these stories you're going around, you're hearing about Ilia Topuria have no direct tying to Paddy the Baddy and Justin Gaethje. I get where this is confusing. I even asked Daniel that. I said, hey man, what am I missing?
And here's where it turns uncomfortable. Chael revealed that Ilia chose to speak because staying quiet only feeds false narratives, and he expects accusations no matter what. So silence wasn't protection, it was gasoline.
So I start reading these articles. I start going through them all. I'm going, man, these headlines are very misleading. Let me get to the bottom of it. And Ilia does at some point make that statement, which is, I knew that this was going to come out. I thought staying quiet was a way to deal with it. But I've now learned when you're quiet in the world of PR, it gives fuel to flames of false narratives. So I'm going to come out and I'm going to let you know that I am expecting sooner or later an accusation to be made about domestic violence.
Ilia basically said if he doesn't speak now, the story gets written without him, and once that happens, you don't control the damage anymore. And this part right here explains why things escalated so fast online. Cal also dropped a hard truth fans don't like hearing. The sport doesn't actually have many blockbuster fights right now, and that's why things like Jones versus Pereira suddenly sound massive, even if they felt crazy a year ago.
Sounds so appealing in comparison.
I want to get Ilia and Islam, and I get that that's not a huge fight. I get it, but there's not a lot of huge fights out there. That's the other part that's really hard to swallow. Like, we've got a sport and a product that we really like, and it comes to us in a beautiful way, and we're along for the ride, but there's not a lot of really big matches out there. This Jones and Pierre business sounds like a really great idea.
An Ilia versus Islam fight might not shake the world on paper, but the UFC is running out of giant options, and when the menu gets small, every delay hurts 10 times more. Then MMA Guru added fuel to the fire and didn't mince words at all, saying this situation is serious enough to overshadow Ilia's career for months, maybe longer, especially with abuse allegations and a child involved. Even if Ilia is telling the truth about blackmail and has evidence ready for court, these cases drag. They get ugly, they move slow, and the Octagon doesn't wait for legal timelines. And that's the brutal reality fighters hate.
Professionally for him.
Ilia Topuria announced that he's going to be taking some time away from the fight game to deal with some personal issues, and no one really knew the full extent of those personal issues, but now we do. Ilia Topuria has released a statement to Twitter, and it's not looking good for Ilia Topuria whatsoever. This is going to be a rough next couple of months, to say the least. I don't know how long this situation's going to go on for, but basically the gist of it is, before we read the entire thing, there's abuse allegations being made against Ilia Topuria. Of course, there's a child involved in the split between him and his partner, so that's going to come into play as well when it comes to custody and a custody battle going down. He says he's being blackmailed and it's all a lie, and he's got evidence and documents to support this that he's going to be submitting to the court. So if that's true, this should be over reasonably quickly, but we know how these things get dragged out.
Guru pointed out that stepping away isn't weakness, it's survival, because when your integrity, family, and reputation are under attack, defending a belt becomes secondary whether fans like it or not. And just when you think it can't get more chaotic, Bryce Mitchell goes nuclear, emotionally charged, zero filter, and suddenly the MMA community is split straight down the middle, with logic on one side and raw emotion on the other.
Through it, I'm going to try and be objective here based on the information we have. I kind of knew this was the situation when Ilia first announced that he was going to be stepping away. I'll mention that at some point in this video. Bryce Mitchell has immediately weighed in on the situation aggressively, had a lot of harsh words for Ilia Topuria. Early doors on the whole situation, but Bryce Mitchell has massively condemned Ilia Topuria and gone after him, and he's angling. I guess he's pushing now for a fight with Alejandro Topuria and said he's down to fight him. They're both in the same weight class now at bantamweight, so
that reaction alone shows how toxic and loud this storm has become, and trust me, it's not dying down anytime soon, because more voices are lining up, and one of them shocked me. Ilia's own mother, aunt, and longtime coach came out in full support, standing behind
Ilia
him publicly.
Topuria's official statement, he comes out with this, gets ahead of the stories, gets ahead of the news before they break it down or before we randomly find out about it as they're going through the court situation. And this is it. Over the past several weeks, I have made the difficult decision to temporarily step away from defending my title. This was not a decision I took lightly. However, when circumstances arise that threaten your personal integrity, your family, and your reputation, there comes a point where you must address them directly.
Sean O'Malley even weighed in, saying dealing with this during fight camp would be hell, and once kids are involved, it stops being trash talk and starts being real-life pain, and that hit different coming from him. And in a wild twist, Ilia even took time to praise Paddy Pimblett, calling him smart, entertaining, and someone who understands family struggles, proving that even in chaos, fighters still see each other as human beings.
This is a horrible situation. Bryce Mitchell immediately weighed in, and he's talking mad shit about Ilia Topuria. Let's let it play.
Well, I got something for you, bitch. It's called the Wife Beater Special. That's right, I got my wife beater on for Ilia Topuria. That bitch puts his hands on a woman. You know, I grew up without a dad. You know, never seen my dad, never will see my dad. And you know what? I'd rather not see my dad than have my dad there beating on my mom. Let me tell you something, what that'll get you killed around these parts, son.
Bryce is going off. Bryce is right in at the deep end, going off on Ilia Topuria, and people are pulling the MMA Guru special and posting pictures of him and John Jones, but this is all Bryce Mitchell needed to see. Okay, and off he goes at Ilia Topuria.
Bad Takes and Josh Thompson echoed the same message. Slow down, let the courts decide, don't rush judgment, because once accusations fly, there's no rewind button, and the truth always costs time.
Topuria's mother wrote, "The best son, the most humane person I know. Only the Lord knows how many people's futures depend on you and how hard you work for them. Everything will be fine, and most importantly, no one can take your peace away. May God bless you, my child." Topuria's aunt said, "Love, Ilia. First of all, you are big, kind, and have a loving heart, aunt." Topuria's longtime coach, Javi Clement, said, "Always with you, brother."
So now everything is hanging in the air. Pereira's path looks clear. Ilia's future looks fragile, and the UFC is quietly watching the calendar, because one more delay could flip the entire lightweight landscape upside down. The real question is this: are we watching one star cement his legacy while another is forced to hit pause? Or is this just the calm before the most explosive comeback story we've seen in years? Because the next update might change everything.
In recent months, I have been subjected to severe and unacceptable pressure, including threats to disseminate false allegations of domestic abuse unless financial demands were met. These allegations are entirely unfounded. The truth of the matter is not an opinion, it is a matter of evidence. So basically saying, and he's not overtly saying it's his wife, but it has to be. He's basically saying, I am being told that they're going to tell the world I hit her unless I pay them money. And so now it's a very dicey situation.
I want to know where he's going to get the evidence to prove he didn't do it. That's the only thing. And look, and I'm on his side in this situation until otherwise proven that he's guilty. And I'm going to always go, and that's just kind of my letter of the law, is like, let's see how the court plays out. Let's see exactly what evidence comes to fruition. I don't want to put my foot in my mouth, which I do all the time. But in this situation, this is very serious.